Third dream. Quote, "So when we take tea with a few guns, of course you'll know what to do who'll do." End quote. Rudyard Kipling. I was at Duffer's Drift on a similar sunny afternoon and under precisely similar conditions, except that I now had 7 lessons running through my mind. I at once sent out 2 patrols, each of 1 NCO and 3 men, 1 to the north and 1 to the south. They were to visit all neighboring farms and kraals and bring in all able-bodied Dutch men and boys and male Africans, by persuasion if possible, but by force if necessary. This would prevent the news of our arrival being carried round to any adjacent commandos, and would also assist to solve the labor question. A small guard was mounted on top of Washout Hill as a lookout. I decided that as the drift could not get up and run away, it was not necessary to take up my post or position quite close to it, especially as such a position would be under close rifle fire from the riverbank, to which the approaches were quite concealed and which gave excellent cover. The very worst place for such a position seemed to be anywhere within the horseshoe bend of the river, as this would allow an enemy practically to surround it. My choice therefore fell on a spot which gently rose from the riverbank some 700 to 800 meters south of the drift. Here I arranged to dig a trench roughly facing the front, which thus would have been about 800 meters clear ground to its front. We started to make a trench about 50 meters long for my 50 men, according to the usual rule. Some little time after the beginning, the patrols came in, having collected 3 Dutchmen, 2 boys, and about 13 Africans. The former, the leader of whom seemed to be a man of education and some importance, were at first inclined to protest when given tools to dig trenches for themselves, showed bundles of passes, and talked very big about complaining to the general, and even as to a question in the House about our brutality. This momentarily staggered me, as I could not help wondering what might happen to poor B.F. if the member of the upper tooting should raise the point, but Westminster was far away, and had hardened my heart. Finally, they were able to see the force of the argument, that it was after all necessary for their own health, should the post be attacked, as otherwise they would be out in the open veldt. The Africans served as a welcome relief to my men as they got tired. They also dug a separate hole for themselves on one side and behind our trench, in a small ravine. By evening we had quite a decent trench dug. The parapet was 2 feet 6 inches thick at the top, and was quite bulletproof, as I tested it. Our trench was not all in one straight line, but in 2 portions, broken back at a slight angle so to give more divergent fire. Rather cunning of me, though each half was of course as straight as I could get it. It was astonishing what difficulty I had to get the men to dig in a nice straight line. I was particular as to this point, because I once heard a certain captain severely told off at maneuvers by a very senior officer for having his trenches out of dressing. No one could tell whether some brass hat might not come round and inspect us next day, so it was just as well to be prepared for anything. At dusk the guard on Washout Hill, for whom a trench had also been dug, was relieved and increased to 6 men, and after teas and giving out the orders for the next day, we all turned in our trenches. The tents were not pitched, as we were not going to occupy them, and it was no good merely showing up our position. A guard was mounted over our prisoners, or rather guests, and furnished 1 sentry to watch over them. Before falling asleep, I ran over my 7 lessons, and it seemed to me that I had left nothing undone which could possibly help toward success. We were entrenched, had a good bulletproof defense, all our rations and ammunition close at hand in the trenches and water bottles filled. It was with a contented feeling of having done everything right and of being quite the little white-haired boy that I gradually dozed off. The next morning dawned brightly and uneventfully, and we had about an hour's work improving the details of our trenches before breakfasts were ready. Just as breakfast was over, the sentry on Washout Hill reported a cloud of dust away to the north, by Regret Table Mountain. This was caused by a large party of mounted men with wheeled transport of some sort. They were most probably the enemy, and seemed to be tricking in all innocence of our presence for the drift. What a scoop, I thought, if they just come in quite unexpecting and cross the drift in a lump without discerning our position. I shall lie low, let the advanced party go past without a shot, and wait until the main body gets over the side within close range, and then open magazine fire into the thick of them. Yes, it will be just when they reach that broken ant-hill about 400 meters away that I shall give the word, fire. However, it was not to be. After a short time the enemy halted, apparently for consideration. The advanced men seemed to have a consultation, and then gradually approached Incidentamba Farm with much caution. 2 or 3 women ran out and waved, whereupon these men galloped to the farm at once. What passed, of course, we could not tell, but evidently the women gave the information as to our arrival and position, because the effect was electrical. The advanced Boers split up into 2 main parties, one riding toward the river a long way to the east, and another going similarly to the west. One man galloped back with the information obtained to the main body, which became all a bustle, and started off with their wagons behind Incidentamba when they were lost to sight. Of course, they were all well out of range, and as we were quite ready, the only thing to do was to wait until they came into the open within range, and then shoot them down. The minutes seemed to crawl. 5, then 10 minutes passed with no further sign of the enemy. Suddenly, "Beg your pardon, sir, I see something on top of that kopje on the far side yonder." One of my men drew my attention to a few specks which looked like wagons moving about on the flattest shoulder of the Incidentamba. Whilst I was focusing my glasses, there was a boom from the hill, followed by a sharp report and a puff of smoke up in the air quite close by, and then the sound of heavy rain pattering down some 200 feet in front of the trench, each drop raising its own little cloud of dust. This, of course, called forth the time-honored remarks of, "What ho, she bumps!" and "Now we shan't be long," which proved only too true. I was aghast. I had quite forgotten the possibility of guns being used against me. Though I had remembered their existence, I do not know with my then knowledge what difference it would have made to my defensive measures. As there was some uneasiness among my men, I, quite cheerfully in the security of our nice trench with the thick bullet-proof parapet, at once shouted out, "It's all right, men. Keep under cover and they can't touch us." A moment later there was a second boom, and the shell whistled over our heads, and the hillside some way behind the trench was spattered with bullets. By this time we were crouching as close as possible to the parapet, which, though it seemed only quite a short time before so complete, now suddenly felt most woefully inadequate, with those beastly shells dropping their bullets down from the sky. Another boom. This time the shell burst well, and the whole ground in front of the trench was covered with bullets, one man being hit. At this moment rifle fire began on Washout Hill, but no bullets came our way. Almost immediately another shot followed with another shower of bullets all over us. A few more men were hit, whose groans were unpleasant to listen to. Tools were seized, and men began frantically to try to dig themselves deeper into the hard earth, as our trench seemed to give no more protection from the dropping bullets than a saucer would from a storm of rain. But it was too late. We could not sink into the earth fast enough. The Boers had got the range of the trench to a nicety, and the shells burst over us now with horrible methodic precision. Several men were hit, and there was no reason why the enemy should cease to rain shrapnel over us until we were all killed. As we were absolutely powerless to do anything, I put up the white flag. As all I could do was thank to Providence that the enemy had no quick-firing field guns, or though we had not been long, we should have been blotted out before we could have hoisted it. As soon as the gunfire ceased, I was greatly surprised to find that no party of Boers came down from their artillery position on the Incidentamba to take our surrender, but within 3 minutes some 50 Boers galloped up from the river bank on the east and west, and a few more came up from the south round Washout Hill. The guard on Washout Hill, which had done a certain amount of damage to the enemy, had 2 men wounded by rifle fire. Not a single shell had come near them, though they were close to the African huts, which were plain enough. What an anticlimax the reality had been from the pleasurable anticipations of the early morn, when I had first sighted the Boers. Of course the women on the farm had betrayed us, but it was difficult to make out why the Boers had first halted and begun to be suspicious before they had seen the women at the farm. What could they have discovered? I failed entirely to solve this mystery. During the day's trek the following lessons slowly evolved themselves, and were stored in my mind in addition to those already learnt. Number 8. When collecting the friendly stranger and his sons in order to prevent their taking information to the enemy of your existence and whereabouts, if you are wishful for a surprise packet, do not forget also to gather his wife and daughter, his manservant and maidservant, who also have tongues, and his ox and ass, which may possibly serve the enemy. Of course, if they are very numerous or very far off, this is impossible. Only do not then hope to surprise the enemy. Number 9. Do not forget that, if guns are going to be used against you, a shallow trench with a low parapet some way from it is worse than useless, even though the parapet be bulletproof 10 times over. The trench gives the gunners an object to lay on and gives no protection from shrapnel. Against well-aimed long-range artillery fire, it would be better to scatter the defenders in the open hidden grass and bushes, or behind stones or anthills, than to keep them huddled in such a trench. With your men scattered around, you can safely let the enemy fill your trench to the brim with shrapnel bullets. Number 10. Though to stop a shrapnel bullet much less actual thickness of earth is necessary than to stop a rifle bullet, yet this earth must be in the right place. For protection, you must be able to get right close under cover, as narrow a trench as possible, with the sides and inside of the parapet as steep as they will stand, to give you the best chance. To hollow out the bottom of the trench sides to give extra room be even better, because the open top of the trench can be kept the less wide. The more like a mere slit the open top of the trench is, the fewer shrapnel bullets will get in. While chewing over these lessons learnt from bitter experience, I had yet another dream.